You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.
You're listening to Straight to the Extra Point, your nugget source for all news, draft coverage, free agency, weekly game analysis, game day betting picks, and fantasy football updates regarding the National Football League. Here's your hosts, Brandon Caputo and Miklos McMaster.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another installment of Straight to the Extra Point, right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, your August 25th, 2021 edition, your source North American sports coverage by sports fans, for sports fans, delivered to you right here in the beautiful Niagara region. You can find us on social media for updates and giveaways by following the podcast on Twitter at Armchair GM Pod, as well as liking us on Facebook and Instagram. You can listen to us on many platforms, including Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Deezer, and now, obviously, like we keep mentioning every single week, now on video form on youtube.com. So make sure you guys are hitting that subscribe button, smashing that bell icon, and the like button for all updates on videos that get released on the YouTube side of things and the video version of the podcast. Give us some love over there. We'd really appreciate it. As always, I'm one of your hosts of Straight to the Extra Point. My name is Brandon Caputo. You can follow me on Twitter right underneath there at Caputs13_AGM. And you can always find me to be joined on the NFL portion of the network by my good friend and co-host, former OUA athlete for the Waterloo Warriors and practicing medical professional. He is Miklos McMaster. You can follow him on Twitter at Miklos_McMaster. Miklos, we're back for part 4 of our 4-part series on the network covering all the divisions for the 2021 NFL season. We're finishing off today with the NFC and the AFC South divisions.
Yeah, and Coach, I'm so excited for this because it means that the regular season is just around the corner.
It is. A couple of weeks away. Can't wait. So we got the week 3 of the preseason coming up this week. We got the new bye week next week, which is in place of the new preseason week 4, which thank God. And then we go into the regular season in a few weeks. So really, really exciting stuff as we go into September. We're going to be switching over to article-based for the month of September while we kind of get things ramped up for the network with our hockey coverage. But Miklos and myself will still be doing our game picks every single week on our website. So, guys, if you don't know where that is, armchairgmsports.com. You get all the things on there, including articles, podcast episodes, sponsors, and contributors. Go and check that out, and that's where our articles will be every single week for the game picks for the NFL season. So go and check those out during the week of whenever we start with week 1 in a couple of weeks there. So every single week we will be doing a game picks article that we put a lot of work and effort into. So make sure you're going to want to check that out as we finish off with the podcasting portion of it here with the season preview. So with that said, if you guys have missed the West, North, or East Division previews, those are live on the channel right now on demand in audio and video form for you guys to go to check that out if you missed those ones. So with that said, let's start with the NFC South Division, Miklos. And oh boy, I mean, the Atlanta Falcons, as you can see in the back, are unfortunately my favorite team. I say that unfortunately because they have given me nothing but heartbreak over the almost 2 decades that I've been following this team. But nonetheless, they are in this division, so I do follow this division more than any other division. I think Miklos should say the same with the AFC West because his Las Vegas Raiders play in that division. So I will have some stuff to say about this, but I want Miklos' opinion on it as well. So we're going to start off with the Carolina Panthers, Miklos, and this team obviously finished last in the division. They did not finish last in the division. They probably should have, but the Atlanta Falcons happened. So they finished 5-11 last year, and Christian McCaffrey went down, which obviously did not help this team whatsoever. He's the consensus number 1 pick in almost every fantasy football draft, and you don't like to compare fantasy to real life, but there's a reason why he is the number 1 overall pick in fantasy football the last couple of seasons. He's just such a dynamic running back and can do both as far as catching out of the backfield and as well being a quality runner.
Yeah, he's probably next to Alvin Kamara. The two of them are probably the most dynamic offensive weapons in the league in terms of catching out of the backfield, lining up at wide receiver, running the ball in between the tackles, being almost impossible to tackle. Yeah, a huge loss for the Panthers last year, especially with the new coach and a new quarterback that they had. And we'll have a new quarterback again, even though Matt Rule returns for his second season.
Yeah, I like Joe Brady a lot as the offensive coordinator. His college style really worked well, when they were able to kind of have their whole offense on the field. But again, they're in a tough division. This team had 3 teams go to the playoffs a few years back, and this team, ever since the Cam Newton and Ron Rivera years, have kind of had to go into this rebuild, and they've really been starting from scratch, and they've done a good job of building it. They'll continue to build it now with new quarterback Sam Darnold in the mix there from the New York Jets. Miklos, what do you think that he's going to bring that they kind of haven't had in the last few years? And if he doesn't prove himself, will the haters of the Jets kind of be saying, maybe it wasn't all completely on Adam Gase and that horrible franchise that it was. Maybe some of the blame does have to be put on Sam Darnold if he doesn't perform here in a new scenario with a better, just fit in Carolina.
Yeah, if Sam Darnold doesn't perform in Carolina, it's because Adam Gase and the Jets so thoroughly broke him as a human being and a quarterback that he could not be recovered by any franchise. I mean, the lack of talent and help and offensive line and organization, just lack of everything in New York that poor Sam had to deal with. I mean, he is a very talented guy. So I do love the fact that he's coming here to Carolina to get a second opportunity in his career. I think Matt Rule did a terrific job coaching this team with a brand new quarterback and no Christian McCaffrey last year. I thought he did a really good job making them a tough team to play week in and week out. And I think Sam Darnold has a terrific opportunity here with a pretty decent supporting cast around him to kind of revitalize his career and get that second opportunity.
Yep, he's got McCaffrey back healthy. Hopefully he can stay healthy. You've got Chuba Hubbard, the Canadian that comes in from Oklahoma State. A great young talent there at running back. And then the wide receiver core doesn't look that bad, Miklos. I mean, they got Robbie Anderson, the longtime New York Jet. You got DJ Moore. You bring in Terrence Marshall, a second-round pick this year. So, I mean, they have the pieces there. And, I think that Sam Darnold is in a better position to succeed here in Carolina, even on a team that's projected to finish in last place, than he ever was as a part of the New York Jets and Adam Gase rundown that he had over there.
Yeah, you mentioned Robbie Anderson coming over for the Jets. Sam Darnold has actually thrown the majority of his touchdown passes to Robbie Anderson. So there's already an immediate connection there with his presumptive number 1 wide receiver. DJ Moore has turned into a really nice offensive weapon for the Panthers and really established himself as a solid NFL wide receiver. They bring in Terrace Marshall, as you mentioned, from LSU. Also, David Moore over from Seattle, who was, at 4th wide receiver, pretty solid option, all things considered. And then a very solid run game with hopefully a healthy Christian McCaffrey and then Chuba Hubbard in the draft.
Yeah, so the offense, we expect the offense to be pretty good this year. We'll see what happens when they go up against a really good Buccaneers defense and a Saints defense that is still to be feared as well. But going over to their defensive side of the ball, Miklos, what are we thinking from the Panthers? I mean, their slogan was #keep pounding through those Ron Rivera years, and they always had a really solid defense. Obviously, Luke Kuechly retired, really put a wrench into this defense as he was the leader on this team and such a fantastic player during his short career. But they've got a few decent pieces on the defensive side of the ball. They've got some first-round picks on there. I mean, Derek Brown was a big ad for them in last year's draft as a nose tackle, and Brian Burns is a former first-round pick. You got Shaq Thompson as a former first-round pick. And they bring in J.C. Horn, which I know your brother Harry was really excited about, and he actually projected J.C. Horn to go to the Carolina Panthers. But they've got some first-round talent on this defense, but do you think they're going to be able to put it together and hold it against some great offenses in this division?
Well, yeah, and as you mentioned, I think the important thing for them is they have solid players at each level of the defense. You mentioned Brian Burns and Derek Brown, both of them great weapons on the defensive line. Brian Burns is definitely a pass rushing threat. Derek Brown really needs to take a step forward and become that interior force that they expect him to be and to start taking over games. Shaq Thompson has really stepped up last year. With the departure of Luke Kuechly, as you mentioned, also Thomas Davis, who was a long time solid linebacker for the Panthers, departed a couple years ago. But so there's a history there of good linebackers in Carolina, and he looks like he's going to be the next one. And then in the secondary, Jeremy Chin was incredible for them. He played linebacker, he played safety, he played corner, he played all over the field, and they're hoping to utilize him more in a mobile safety role as opposed to having him down in a linebacking slot, which he played more last year. And then J.C. Horn he was talking about be in the top corner in the draft coming in whenever he was drafted. So if he can come in and be that true shutdown guy for them, then they should have quite a few solid pieces. It's just whether they have the depth across the board to be able to compete with some pretty ridiculous offenses in their division.
Yeah, they bring in AJ Boye as well, so we'll see if he can kind of revitalize his career after a really down year last year. So, like you mentioned, they've definitely got some solid pieces and some really young pieces to build around on this defense, but I just don't think that they're there yet. I think they will be in a few years, but still a young team that's building back up from, the ashes of nothing in this. And really, the fact that they didn't finish last in the division last year was a credit to, what Matt Rule did, the fact that they won 5 games, and also to the Atlanta Falcons for blowing 9 out of their 12 losses where they were leading, and just a complete dumpster fire of a team that was. But the Carolina Panthers, we'll see how they continue their kind of rebuild, and we'll have to wait and see, if they can improve on the 5-win season this year. But again, it's going to be tough because they're playing against some really good offenses in this division. So we'll move on here to the New Orleans Saints, Miklos, and this is a team that obviously is going to. It's a big loss losing a Hall of Famer like Drew Brees, and if I can pull up the history of this division, the New Orleans Saints have won it the last 4 seasons, so they are the defending champion for 4 straight years and counting. Do you think that there's any chance? We saw the Tampa Bay, they didn't win the division last year. They were the wild card team. They ran the table. They went to New Orleans, won that game and in the playoffs, and then obviously went on to win the Super Bowl. What are you thinking about the Saints' chances this year to have a 5-peat for the division? Again, it's not what they had wanted, winning the division and then losing to Tampa in the playoffs, a division rival. But, for the most part in the last decade, as much as I hate to say it, they've really dominated the second part of it and have really been the team that everybody's been chasing.
Yeah, I think the Saints would trade any regular season success for some postseason success. That's really where they've struggled the last couple of years. I think Sean Payton and Drew Brees both, as much success as they had in the regular season and the records that they've put up with their offenses, would both trade all of those records away for a couple of more rings and shots at the title, which I think they, given their talent and skill, underachieved as a coach and quarterback tandem. People would have expected a few more opportunities in the championship or even a shot at the Super Bowl than they ended up getting. And I think the biggest question for this Saints team is who their starting quarterback is going to be and how well that quarterback is going to be able to perform to get them back to that playoff shot to go for the Super Bowl.
Do you think that, your opinion of them would change on who, if they win the division or not, depending on if Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston are under center? Does that really make it or break it for you if one or the other are the quarterback? Do you think that obviously Jameis is more of the gunslinger, Taysom Hill is more of the, he's more of the gadget type quarterback? So what do you think of either of those guys leading their team to a division title? Do you think it has to be one or the other?
Well, this is something interesting that I was seeing people start talking about. And if there was a coach who was going to do it, I would say either Belichick or Sean Payton, a true 2-quarterback system. Have Taysom Hill packages and have Jameis Winston packages and roll them both out there, given what the odds and the situation on the field. You get close to the goal line, bring in Taysom Hill because he's a run threat. He can throw the ball, makes defenses account for more. You're in the green zone, you're like between the 20s. You have Jameis Winston out there, got the huge arm and still has some athletic talent, can threaten defenses different ways. So I think if there is anyone who's going to do it to kind of run that 2-quarterback system, it's Sean Payton. Whether he does that or not, I do think Jameis Winston gives this team a better chance to go further into the playoffs and have a shot at the Super Bowl than Taysom Hill does, just in terms of arm talent and quarterbacking skill alone.
Now, again, the one thing that I think that could hurt this team is the wide receiver core in the last couple of years has really taken a step back. Michael Thomas is going to miss 7 games to start the season because of that whole mess with his surgery taking place pretty late in the season. So Traquan Smith, Marquez Callaway, and Deontay Harris are going to be the 1, 2, and 3 receivers for this team until you get Michael Thomas back in Week 7. We don't even know what kind of Michael Thomas we're going to get at that point. Adam Trotman was also carried off, their tight end, last night or a couple nights ago. ago in the Monday night preseason game. So they've got Nick Vanette as their tight end at the moment. And again, like, is this, like, you know what you have in Alvin Kamara. He's going to catch balls out of the backfield and be a solid runner. They've got Latavius Murray and even Devontae Freeman, the former Falcon and division rival that they brought in as a third-string running back. So they're going to run the ball efficiently, but are they going to be able to pass the ball efficiently with Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill not having quite the weapons that we're used to from the Saints wide receiver core in past years?
Yeah, I do think wide receiver depth is a little bit concerning for them, especially with Michael Thomas missing time. Marquez Callaway looked really good in the preseason game. Of course, caveat, preseason game, doesn't really mean that much. But they really are going to need someone to step up. They need Traquan Smith to step up. They need Marquez Callaway to perform the regular season. They need Deontay Harris to step up. Even little Jordan Humphrey and Ty Montgomery in their back depth. Like, they need everyone across the board to step up and help these quarterbacks in a new system, because you can't expect Alvin Kamara to be the only weapon for your offense out there threatening defenses on a week-out, week-in basis.
The only positive I could say about that is at least they have a very, very good offensive line to be able to protect Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill to kind of bide time for those receivers to kind of get open that they might need, because they have one of the best offensive lines in all of football. A lot of top-end draft picks on there, and everybody looks like they're coming back. So, like you mentioned, Marquez Callaway has kind of been the standout guy. He's the trendy guy as far as the pickup goes in waiver wire for fantasy football. So we'll see when the regular season starts, like you mentioned, if that is actually going to mean anything from what he did in the preseason. But good start. We'll see what happens if this team can stay above water until Michael Thomas comes back, and if they can kind of go on a little run with that. As far as their offense goes, their defense, Miklos, is just sound as can be. I mean, them and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the fact that they have two of the top probably 5 defenses in football within this division is pretty incredible. They bring back a lot of good pieces on this defense, and do you expect them to be just as good as they were last year and kind of really be, at least for the first half of the season while Michael Thomas is out, carry this team as they can try find their identity on offense?
Yeah, I definitely think they're going to have to lean on their defense, and I also think that the defense is the thing keeping their window open now that Drew Brees is gone. The defense was really incredible last year. I think the one big thing that they're going to need is for Marcus Davenport to really step up. With Trey Hendrickson leaving in free agency, he was a great weapon opposite Cameron Jordan. So Marcus Davenport really needs to step up and be that threat opposite Cameron Jordan at the other defensive end spot. But other than that, across the board, the defense is very, very solid, and there's going to be a lot asked from them, I imagine, early in the season once this offense gets established, and especially with an uncertain quarterback situation.
Yeah, a very solid secondary there, Miklos. I mean, they've got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson listed as the backup strong safety at this point because they brought in Malcolm Jenkins from the Eagles, and he should probably be a starter on most teams, but that's how solid the Saints are and the great depth that they have. I think that can't be said enough, is that the fact that the Saints, they have some great players, but they've always found guys to kind of step up into those secondary spots and move up into those starter positions when injuries happen. And as much as I hate to say it, I mean, they've done a great job at showing why, and a perfect example of what happens when you have good depth throughout your organization, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I said it last year that because of their defense, I like their chances the best out of anybody in the NFC who was playing against the Buccaneers in the playoffs in terms of matching up with them, because they were able to match up with the Buccaneers offense with their defense across the board, which is not something that many, if any, teams could say that they could, especially with Marshawn Lattimore and his history of matchups against Mike Evans. It's one of the premier corner wide receiver matchups every year. It's must-see football, especially how physical the two of them get. So the depth is huge, and part of the reason that they're going to have an opportunity to win this division again.
Yeah, and they've even picked up a couple other wide receivers that I just saw here. Chris Hogan, and what he did for the Patriots, we know what that was. And Kevin White, who we talked about a few weeks ago on the West Division preview, he's switched teams already. So he's now signed by the New Orleans Saints. So we talked about Kevin White being a former first-round bust for the Bears, how he was had a chance with the Niners, and now a couple weeks later, we're still recording these season previews, and he makes his second appearance on the show here in the NFC South. So we'll see if they're going to need that depth and if those guys can kind of be something for this New Orleans Saints team. But we're going to move on here, Miklos, to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I mean, what else do you even need to say about this team? They won the Super Bowl. They basically brought back every single offense and defensive player or starter on their team. They're not losing basically anybody of substance at this point, maybe a couple of backups, but they bring their entire starting offense and defense back, which in the NFL is incredible, especially when you win a Super Bowl. You expect a few guys to leave to get paid by other teams, and they've brought the exact same offense, same exact defense back. Bruce Arians back, Byron Leftwich, Todd Bowles, a great, coaching staff there. They've won the Super Bowl. What really can you say about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers other than they're the favorites once again?
I think returning the coaching staff is even more rare than returning all of the starters. Of course, returning all of the starters is absolutely ridiculous. They returned 22 starters, which is unheard of, but also both coordinators, who are unbelievable, and the head coach all stay after winning the Super Bowl. Incredibly rare. And I think there's really only two things to say. Is this going to be a perfect season for Tom Brady, and is he going to complete it? And are they going to be the first team since Tom Brady in 2003, 2004 to repeat as NFL champs?
Hurts me to say that, but yeah, I mean, they're just stacked everywhere, Miklos. I mean, we can run down every single position, and there's a reason why they're the number one ranked defense coming into the season. They should be up near the top as far as offense goes. Their offense is loaded. When Antonio Brown is your number 3 receiver, I mean, I don't know how it gets any better than that. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Rob Gronkowski, O.J. Howard, to me, in fantasy football, I'm not touching any of these guys because we don't know. They have so many weapons that how can you predict one guy's going to get all the targets? They're really going to be a solid timeshare, and all of them just want to win. Antonio Brown's finally turned his attitude around to finally look like he's at least a team player with a guy like Tom Brady, who really vouched for him in that spot. And we haven't really seen what they can do in the preseason yet. They started Blaine Gabbert against the Titans, and he got absolutely lit up, and they played most of their backups. But I expect nothing less than possibly a 14 or 15 win season from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, they didn't win the division last year. They came in as an underdog, as a wild card team, and ran the table for the 4 weeks and won the Super Bowl. So, I mean, it might be a little bit different this year when they are the hunted, kind of like we mentioned with the Buffalo Bills last week. But, do you see any way that this team doesn't repeat as division champions, let alone NFC champions?
I think the rough start to their year last year is why they didn't win the division. They won their last 8 games of the year, including sweeping through the road games in the playoffs and then being the first team to win a home game for the Super Bowl. I think a sneaky addition in the offseason was Giovanni Bernard. In the Patriots, they had James White and these other scat back type players who were there for screen passes and stuff. That's another classic player for Tom Brady to have around, to have Giovanni Bernard to throw these little screen passes to and things like that as another offensive weapon. Not that they need them with the depth that you just mentioned. It's going to be a pretty ridiculous year to see. They have a full offseason finally where they can all train together. Last year they didn't, and it was a bunch of new guys. So if you're in the NFC South, I think it's going to be a rough year.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the encouragement there. But, I mean, and on the defensive side of the ball, not much else you could say other than they returned everybody. They look great. They're the number 1 ranked defense going into the season. We'll see if they can live up to those expectations. That's not easy. But, and again, your boy Levante David being the leader on that defense and kind of coaching a guy like Devin White, who's projected probably to take over that spot once Levante's done. But really happy for him that he finally, he's through all those really down years in Tampa Bay where the Buccaneers were the laughingstock of the league, and he was the one kind of consistent guy with that, and he was able to kind of get his ring and still be the leader on that defense. So that was nice to see as well, and he's kind of reaping the benefits of it now with such a great defense around him all, from top to bottom.
Yeah, this I'm so happy for Levante David. As you said, he's really been grinding there, been a stalwart for Tampa Bay for so many years, and now to have the opportunity to finally win and be a dominant team is so great for him. And then across the board, just veteran and young talent. They have Ndamukong Suh, who's been a force still, he's getting up there in age. JPP and Shaquille Barrett just dominating in the pass rush. Then also Devin White, as you mentioned, then Antoine Winfield really establishing himself as a premier safety in their secondary. They just overwhelming amount of talent that this team has is almost sickening.
It is very sickening, the fact that everybody's back, but not much else to say about the Buccaneers. They're probably going to be around for a while, at least as long as Tom Brady continues to play, because this offense and defense, there really aren't any holes that we can really mention or bring up that's worth talking about further. So let's move on to last but not least in the NFC South, and that is the Atlanta Falcons. Miklos, I don't really have anything to say about this team, so I'm going to let you go ahead.
Really? Come on, coach.
No, I'm just gonna let you go first, and then I'll give my analysis without trying to get too fired up before we take the break to the AFC South. But the Atlanta Falcons last year, Miklos, just like I mentioned, 9 out of 12 of their losses were in games that they were ahead, which that just goes to show, like, they've got to be one of the dumbest teams that I think I've ever watched. And I'm quoting from Stephen A. Smith from First Take. Just the way that this team lost games last year, them and the LA Chargers really are brethrens in that regard. Just so much talent, and they just, for whatever reason on the field, just have these boneheaded plays and just boneheaded decisions. The fundamentals are really lacking on this team, and were lacking under head coach Dan Quinn, which why him and GM Thomas Dimitroff were eventually fired. Arthur Smith coming in as the new head coach from the Tennessee Titans as their offensive coordinator. You've got Dean Pease, the longtime defensive coordinator, a great defensive coordinator in this league that they were able to get out of retirement with Arthur Smith from Tennessee. The Titans sorely missed last year on their defense, and then they bring in Terry Fontenot as their new GM, who is the longtime player development a director of player development for the New Orleans Saints, so he comes over from a division rival. So they've got the pieces here to be able to turn things around, but it doesn't look like they were going for a straight rebuild, Miklos. They bring back Matt Ryan as the quarterback. They don't draft a guy in the first round like I had projected them to do with a guy like Justin Fields. You take the best player that people say is available in the draft in the unicorn, Kyle Pitts, the highest tight end ever picked, with projected already as a future Hall of Famer, which is crazy to think for a guy that hasn't even played a snap in the NFL yet. But just what are your general thoughts on the Atlanta Falcons? Trying to do a quick retool on the spot here to try to have a few more years here with Matt Ryan and obviously Julio Jones being traded because of the cap situation that Thomas Dimitroff had put this team in was atrocious. So what are you thinking of the Atlanta Falcons? Again, they're playing in division with the Super Bowl champions and the projected team to win the Super Bowl again, and an New Orleans Saints team that still is very good, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So where do you see the Atlanta Falcons fitting into this NFC South kind of equation here?
Well, I think while there is lots of reason to be pessimistic given how the season went last year, I do think a retool is something that is very possible for the Falcons. As you mentioned, so many games that they lost last year, they were either in a winning position or very close to being in a winning position near the end of the game. And then, of course, lots of unfortunate events that cost them those games. Just like the Chargers, just finding brand new ways to lose every single week.
I have
which
gray
is
hair in the back of my head from this team last year, but go ahead.
Yeah, it was crushing, but I will say there was lots of positives to be seen there, like the fact that they did have those leads, and I think bringing in a full new front office and coaching staff is a great way to change the culture, and you have the weapons to win those games. And all you need is the culture change to have that finish. So I think bringing back Matt Ryan and then getting him a unicorn weapon like Kyle Pitts to add to an already unbelievable weapon in Kyle Ridley. I know Julio Jones left, and you cannot replace a Julio Jones, but he has been extremely limited. And despite that teams are focusing on Calvin Ridley, he's still been unstoppable every single week. So to now add Kyle Pitts to the mix, you have Hayden Hurst still, and then also Russell Gage having it there. If he's not going to have many people looking at him, Russell Gage has an opportunity to have a breakout year if people are focusing on Pitts and Ridley so much. So I do think there is definitely an opportunity here for Atlanta to have a real good bounce back year because they do have the pieces there. It's just a matter of attitude and culture.
Yeah, they've tried to fix it on the spot here, Miklos, and I do like the fact that Calvin Ridley is now going to get the chance as a number one receiver. He's been said by even players like DK Metcalf that Calvin Ridley's the best route runner in the NFL. So, I mean, those words aren't taken lightly. So, you know what Calvin Ridley can do. We'll see now that he's the wide receiver one. Again, like you mentioned, Julio Jones has been in and out of the lineup the last couple of years. And as great as Julio Jones, go down as one of the all-time greats and probably the best wide receiver in Atlanta Falcons history, it was time, with the cap situation, and he wanted to move on. And then now they've got Calvin Ridley, you've got Kyle Pitts, you've got Hayden Hurst. Like you mentioned, Russell Gage really stepped up last year as a number 2/3 receiver. We'll kind of need him to take that next step. And then even on at running back, I mean, Todd Gurley really brought them nothing. It really showed that he had really taken a few steps back from the year that he had with the Rams, and then that unfortunate injury really derailed him. So they bring in Mike Davis, the running back from the Carolina Panthers, division rival. Mike Davis actually from Atlanta, so he's excited to come back home. But again, he took over for Christian McCaffrey when he went down for Carolina last year, and he took the league by storm for a few weeks and had some great runs. So I think he's bringing me back to vibes of Michael Turner, that same type of style of runner, that bowling ball type guy that can, he can get you the few yards that you need, but he can also be a reliable back to be, close to 1,000-yard back every season and a reliable guy back there. He's not going to blow you away with his speed, but he's going to be a solid guy, and the Falcons were really successful when they had a guy like Mike Davis who was, like that with Matt Ryan, and you had those guys to be able to lean on the running game, because the Falcons over the years, just the running game has not been there. They've tried guys out like Steven Jackson. Devontae Freeman had really one good season, and Tevin Coleman was more of the catching back out of the backfield. So the Falcons, in order to succeed, we know their passing game's going to be good, but you don't need Matt Ryan having the most completion attempts in the or most attempted passes in the league like he did last year. So they're really going to need the run game to be a lot better than it has been in past years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Mike Davis is a great addition. He's not something special back, I would say, but he is very solid, a solid pro, and he ran hard for Carolina last year in replacement of Christian McCaffrey. So I think he's a solid addition, and will round out this offense given the weapons that they have for Matt Ryan to throw to, and hopefully even things out a little bit.
And Arthur Smith, I think it can't be understated that he was the tight end guy in Tennessee. He was the tight ends coach. Then before becoming the offensive coordinator, he really helped those tight ends like Jonnu Smith and Anthony Ferguson really take that next step there in Tennessee, and now he's probably got the best 1-2 punch as far as tight ends go in the league. You could probably put up New England with Jonnu Smith, who went on to get a big deal with New England, and Hunter Henry from the Chargers. But Kyle Pitts and Hayden Hurst, that's a very solid 1-2 punch at tight end. You could probably do a lot of 2 tight end sets, and I'm sure Arthur Smith is planning and salivating over having that as a guy who's coached tight ends in his past. And Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage. This offense has the ability to carry this team like they usually do every year, because the Falcons always seem to have an atrocious defense. Even when they have defensive head coaches, it doesn't make any sense to me. But we'll move on to the defensive side of the ball, Miklos, and like we know what the offense is going to be able to do, but with that, they're going to be going up against some really good offenses in Tampa Bay. New Orleans is still going to, we expect them to be good with Jameis Winston throwing the ball, and Carolina's got weapons as well too, so they can't be understated in this division either. And this defense has to be a lot better if the Falcons want any chance of being a playoff contending team, because they were dead last in a lot of categories, which they usually are, but they really need to step it up. And with Dean Pease as the defensive coordinator, he's always been a solid defensive guy to be around. He's never missed the playoffs, he's never been fired from a position before in the NFL, and that is very rare for a coach to have never been fired from a position. So for Dean Pease to be able to be in the sport that long and never to be fired says something about how great and how well respected he is coming into a really bad Falcons defense, and hopefully being able to use some of these main pieces like Grady Jarrett, Deion Jones, and Foye Oluokun, and a first-round pick in A.J. Terrell last year to really strengthen this Falcons defense, because they're really going to need it playing against a team like Tampa Bay twice a year.
Yeah, I did not know that. That is incredibly impressive by Dean Pease. And I will say he's definitely going to have his hands full this year. I think he's going to have to really forge this defense into a true unit, because they definitely don't have a lot of star power. Grady Jarrett. Oh my God, Grady Jarrett has been incredible for them on the defensive line. So they do have a bona fide force on the D-line there. Deion Jones has been incredible as a linebacker as well. And then you mentioned A.J. Terrell, who they drafted last year. Took his lumps, but really is coming on as a solid corner. So they definitely do have some pieces out there. It's just they're really going to have to play as a unit to play against some of these offenses that they're going to be facing in their division alone, let alone the rest of the NFC.
Yeah, I mean, if the Falcons are going to compete, I think they're still going to need to put up, 28 to 32 points a week to really be able to say that they can be contenders in this division. And do you think that their defense, at the end of the day, is going to be able to hold up? We saw them give up some bad leads last year. Do you think that, again, under the leadership of Dean Pease, do you think that they're going to be more, more, I guess, efficient and, X's and O's as far as just being able to know what they're supposed to do in certain situations and just be more sound all around when it comes to the fundamentals of football, which clearly Dan Quinn did not get across to this team, because the way that they lost games last year were inexcusable for a high school team, let alone an NFL team. So do you think that just having Dean Pease's presence there as a very solid defensive guy is going to be able to help this unit at least be better than last year, because it couldn't get any worse?
Yeah, I definitely think that the reason that the defense will lose games this year will just be from being overmatched as opposed to costly boneheaded mistakes and dumb plays, which isn't much of a consolation, but will definitely make you feel a lot better if you end up losing a game and giving up like 40 points just because, they just can't hang with like a Tampa Bay, for example.
Yeah, and their only Pro Bowler last year was Young Wei-Koo as the kicker. He came in and was really great for them last year, and the former Georgia State soccer player has found a niche here for the Atlanta Falcons, and they've always really had a good kick game with Morton Anderson and Matt Bryant for all those years. So getting another solid kicker in Young Wei-Koo is someone that Matt Ryan can rely on, that he's mostly had for the better part of his career here. So definitely solid in the special teams unit. They bring in Cordero Patterson as a solid kick and punt returner as well, that's been in the league for a long time. So we'll have to see with the Atlanta Falcons if they're going to be able to bounce back and not lose 9 games that they were ahead in this year. We'll see if they're even ahead in 9 games this year like they were last year, but we'll wait and see on that. The standings last year, Miklos, 12-4 for the Saints, 11-5 for the Bucs. They ran the table as the wild card team to win the Super Bowl. The Panthers are 5-11, the Falcons are 4-12. What are you thinking for the NFC South standings this year? The Buccaneers lead the way, obviously, to not only win the NFC South, but win the Super Bowl at minus 198. The Saints come in at second at plus 341. The Falcons at plus 794. And the Panthers coming at the rear at plus 1,053. Is there anything other than Tampa Bay at this point as far as winning the division?
No. 100%. Unless barring some unforeseen injury or some unforeseen circumstances, this is Tampa Bay's division to lose.
Do you think, we saw 3 teams from this division go to the playoffs a few years ago. Do you think that the Saints and Falcons have a shot to, maybe in that wild card position? Because obviously you can pretty much put Tampa Bay as a lock-in to win the division. So you have the Saints and Falcons essentially battling for one of the wild card spots at this point.
I do think the Saints definitely have an opportunity, especially if Sean Payton can cut down Jameis Winston's interceptions and he puts together a 5,000-yard season like he did with this Tampa Bay team that Tom Brady's playing on. They definitely have an opportunity to be a wild card team and a postseason threat. I feel like Atlanta right now is on the outside looking in and is going to have to put together some really good games to get themselves into a wild card position.
Yeah, I think the Falcons are going to have to exceed the expectations of their retool that they're trying to do on the spot here for the last little bit of window of Matt Ryan's solid career here with 1, maybe 2 more seasons. We'll have to see if Arthur Smith can really turn this team around considering what they were last year. So, and obviously the Panthers are still kind of rebuilding in Matt Rule's system there, and they'll be there in a few years, just not yet at this point, especially with teams like New Orleans and Tampa Bay still reigning supreme on the NFC South. So unfortunately, I'm going to go with Tampa Bay as well, but I say that not with the greatest enthusiasm, as not the biggest fan of them, obviously, but got to give the Super Bowl champs credit where it's due, and you got to be until you. You can't be the man until you beat the man, as Ric Flair would say. So Tampa Bay is the team to beat this year, and we'll have to see where the rest of the NFC South kind of fares with that. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our commercial break on the show today. We're going to come back, and we're going to discuss the AFC South Division on the second part of today's episode. So stay right here. Be right back on Straight to the Extra Point in our South Division previews for the 2021 NFL season right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network.
Experience a new way to play daily fantasy sports and esports on Thrive Fantasy. Thrive's game concept revolves around player props, which are simple over-unders on player stats. There are contests for traditional sports including the NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, and cricket, as well as esports titles including CSGO, Dota 2, League of Legends, and more coming soon. Here's how to play. Choose your lineup of over-unders for top-tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. Each prop has a fantasy point total based on how likely it is to hit. The more points the selection is worth, the riskier it is. Rack up the most points and win a share of the prize pool. Thrive is awarded over $2 million in cash, so come and prop up today.
You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network, the Niagara region's best local source for North American sports podcasting coverage. By sports fans, for sports fans.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to segment 2 of today's South Division preview right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Brandon Caputo and Miklos McMaster back with you here. Guys, if you're enjoying the video version of the podcast, make sure you're hitting that like button, smashing subscribe, and hitting that bell icon for all updates on videos that get released on our YouTube channel. Give us some love over there on the video side of things. We put a lot of work and time and effort into that portion of our content. So with that said, Miklos, I forgot to mention in the NFC South portion in part 1 that Josh Rosen is now the backup quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons after A.J. McCarron went down with a torn ACL in the Week 2 preseason game. So I know you're a big A.J. McCarron guy as a human being and former Oakland Raiders backup quarterback, but Josh Rosen, the former first-round pick for the Arizona Cardinals, kind of bounced around a little bit. He might be an interesting ad for the Falcons as far as a backup quarterback. Maybe if he learns under Matt Ryan and develops the way that he was projected to be over the next season or two, maybe he ends up taking over for the Falcons, which would be a pleasant surprise as a guy they just picked up, off of waivers here from the 49ers practice squad.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting pickup, especially given where Matt Ryan is in his career and potential quarterback of the future for the Atlanta Falcons, kind of picked up off the junk heap. I really feel bad for Josh Rosen. The way his career's gone is obviously not ideal. He's an extremely highly drafted quarterback. And maybe this is just the opportunity he needs to sit behind Matt Ryan for a couple of years, kind of get settled. He's been bouncing around a lot, and then have an opportunity to really break out and be the player that people projected him to be. Yeah,
we'll see if that ends up working out for them in a good way with the unfortunate injury to A.J. McCarron in the preseason Week 2 game. So let's move on to the AFC South portion of today's episode, Miklos. And this division, I mean, not in the last little while, but I feel like this division, for at least the better part of the 2000s, was just a division that everybody laughed at as far as, this division sucks, and, they don't really have a lot of quality teams in this division other than the Peyton Manning's Indianapolis Colts teams. The Texans and Titans have kind of been, for the most part, irrelevant during those years in the mid-2010s era, and the Jags have obviously, been really up and down. They've had a couple of good years and then a lot of bad years mixed in there. That team in 2017 was just a heartbreaker because they really probably should have went to the Super Bowl representing the AFC if they would have had a decent quarterback that wasn't named Blake Bortles, that were really carried by a great young defense, and it just never seemed they never seemed to be able to keep that together after that one season. But as far as the AFC South goes in recent memory here, Miklos, and I got it up here on the screen for the video viewers here, the Tennessee Titans had a great year last year and obviously took the league by storm in the 2019 season when they kind of ran the table and lost in the AFC Championship game to the Kansas City Chiefs. But it's crazy to me to think that the Houston Texans, and they're the first team we're going to talk about here, have won this division 4 of the last 6 years. How a team that has won the division that many times can turn into such a complete dumpster fire and be possibly, if not the crown for worst team going into this season, Miklos. Oh my God. I'll let you talk about the AFC South first before we get into the Texans, but this team just has me, scratching my head as far as what could they possibly do, and how long it's going to take for this team to build back up again.
Yeah, as you mentioned about this division, it really has been a pretty crappy division over the last decade or so. Even when Peyton Manning was there was really the Colts and everybody else. They dominated that division when Peyton Manning was there, and it wasn't even just because of how great Peyton Manning was, but how great he was and how garbage the rest of the teams in the division were. They were just chalked up wins every week for the Colts during that time because they were just such a mess as organizations. You mentioned the Jaguars had that little spurt where they were really good, but of course had nobody at quarterback, which they're hoping is rectified now with the drafting of Trevor Lawrence. And then the Titans, though, really on the upswing. I think with Mike Vrabel and the rest of the team that they're building there and the resurgence of Ryan Tannehill, they're really building something there in Tennessee, which is exciting. And I mean, even Indianapolis, I know Andrew Luck, they had the Andrew Luck era, then Phillip Rivers babysat them for a year. They are hoping that Carson Wentz, with being reunited with Reich, will be able to keep the tradition of success in Indianapolis going, but then finally come to the Houston Texans. They were a dumpster fire. All of those years that they won the division, they were still a dumpster fire. That's how freaking good Deshaun Watson was. And now we've learned maybe not a good human being in any stretch of the word, but a phenomenal football player. And now that he is gone, all the chickens are coming home to roost in this absolute bonfire, dumpster fire, black hole of an organization who definitely are taking the crown for the worst team in this season.
This is what I got to say about the Houston Texans. I mean, again, like, just crickets up and down this. I mean, we could do a whole episode on this network about how bad the Houston Texans are from top to bottom, but we just don't have enough time for that. I mean, I don't know how this team wins 3 games, Miklos. I really don't, especially with Jacksonville's going to be improved, you'd think, with Trevor Lawrence coming in there. Tennessee is the team to beat right now. They're one of the top teams in the AFC going into the season with one of the best offenses in the AFC, at least, with the amount of talent they have over there. Their defense is kind of shaky, and then you have the Colts, who everybody just expected them to be a great team last year and said that they were probably a decent quarterback away from winning it, even though Phillip Rivers played well in that Buffalo game that they eventually lost in the playoffs. But that team has all the talent to be a contending team, and they bring in a guy like Carson Wentz to reunite with Frank Reich. So it might be scary for the Houston Texans. And again, they had no future. They really had nobody who wanted to coach this team after the Bill O'Brien era, and not having any first-round picks. The Deshaun Watson situation, if he's actually going to play, if he's going to, not sit out, or if he's going to be going to jail, we don't know. David Culley, the poor guy coming over from the Baltimore Ravens, has got a lot on his plate, and even poor Lovie Smith, the former Chicago Bears and Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach, is now the defensive coordinator of this team, and I really feel bad for Lovie in this spot because he's got a big job on his hands. So what on God's green earth are we expecting from this Houston Texans team? We'll start off with the offense. They got Tyrod Taylor, the former Buffalo Bill and Los Angeles Charger there. They've got, it looks like it just, excuse me, it looks like it's just a bunch of cast-offs of former players that used to be good on other teams that were possibly all-pro type players, but now have just kind of tried to ride out the rest of their career and found a spot here on an atrocious Houston Texans team that's going to just have a bunch of misfit toys, it looks like, and is going to have a really, really rough season.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say this team is the land of misfit toys. I feel bad for Tyrod Taylor. Ever since he got injured and Justin Herbert ran away with that job, he's been really struggling to find his footing again to get an opportunity as a starting quarterback, and now he's coming in a far from ideal situation. They do have some decent depth at running back. Mark Ingram's come back healthy. Phillip Lindsay is former 1,000-yard rusher for the Denver Broncos. David Johnson put together an okay season for them last year. And then a wide receiver. I mean, Anthony Miller really disappointing in Chicago, and they got rid of him. Chris Connolly kind of had some up and down years, but nothing special. And then Brandon Cooks, I mean, him also some up and down years. Really, it's a collection of meh across the board for this offense. Nothing special at all. they do bring back quite a few of their offensive linemen, so they have some continuity there. And if Tyrod Taylor can manage the game well, I do say the one thing they have going for them is that they have a pretty cupcake schedule going into this year. So that's why I do think they're not going to be in a situation like the Jets were last year, where I said it would be a miracle if the Jets won a game. And, of course, the miracle happened near the end of the season. But I definitely don't think they're in that situation. They do play Jacksonville twice during the year, and I think they'll be able to get a win there just from how new everything is in Jacksonville and how young their team is and the lack of talent. But they also play, I'm just looking down my notes for the schedule here, they also play Carolina, which is a home game for them. Carolina has to travel to them, so that's a possibility for a win. They also play the Jets this year. They play the Jacksonville Jaguars twice, as I mentioned. They play the Chargers near the end of the season, which is just the game that the Chargers would lose. So there definitely is some options there, maybe even to get 3 or 4 wins for this dumpster fire team.
There really isn't anything that I can really say about this team, Miklos. Again, I feel bad for some of the defensive players on this team that, have potential to kind of revitalize their careers, but just given what this team is projected to be with just the scrap heap that was left from the Bill O'Brien era, it's going to take a long time for this team to get back up, especially if they don't have Deshaun Watson at quarterback, who, like you mentioned, I think made up for a lot of deficiencies with this team over the years and, was able to carry them and lead them to contention for most of these years. So it's going to be tough for the Houston Texans, and like I said, if they win 3 games, I'd be shocked this year. But like you mentioned, they've got some winnable games this year, and we'll see if the Chargers blow it once again, which they usually do against one really bad team. And why not with this team? Could be the perfect poster child for a really horrible loss during the season for the Los Angeles Chargers. But David Culley and Lovie Smith, they got a big task on their hands, and we'll see this island of misfit toys, how this team works out. But I'm not going to be too enthusiastic about it, and they'll probably have the first overall pick, I think, going into the 2022 NFL draft. So unfortunately for the Houston Texans and any of their fans out there listening, it's probably going to be a rough season, and I feel for you in that regard. So we'll move on to the Indianapolis Colts, and I have the standings up on the screen right now, but they finished second in the division, even though they tied the Titans for an 11-5 record last year. Titans had the tiebreaker in that regard. But I think the Colts, Miklos, again, we don't know the status of Carson Wentz. He's hoping to play week 1. We'll see if he does or not. But regardless of that, this is my dark horse team for the AFC this year. I really think that they have all the pieces. If they would have just had a quarterback that was able to give them more than what Phillip Rivers gave them last year, this could have been a Super Bowl contending team. They've got a very, very good defense. They have an offensive line, which, heaven forbid they could have given Andrew Luck, and they probably would have won a Super Bowl or 2 if they would have had an offensive line that was at least decent to put around Andrew Luck during those great years that he had before sending him into an early retirement due to no offensive line. But I mean, if Carson Wentz and Frank Reich can get back to that chemistry like we saw in Philadelphia for that one season, I know it's a lot to ask, and Carson Wentz has had very strong injury history in the last couple of years especially. But to me, this Indianapolis Colts team is primed and ready to win, and if they are able to contend with the Titans, they might not win the division, but if they get in as a wild card team, they're going to be a scary team to go up against because they've got all pros all around the field, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And to me, I think this Colts team is a team that I don't think anybody wants to play come postseason time, and even to start the season if they're fully healthy, because with the season Jonathan Taylor had last year running the ball, and if Carson Wentz can sling the ball out to some of these talented wide receivers that are kind of flying under the radar, like Zach Pascal, Michael Pittman Jr., and even Paris Campbell to a certain extent, T.Y. Hilton, the older veteran now. But I think this team is primed and ready to win if if things go right for them and they're able to kind of contend with the Titans for this division.
Yeah, I think the biggest question mark for the Colts is Carson Wentz. They're going to go as far as he goes. The depth behind him is pretty non-existent. It's really a quarterback that they're looking for because, as you mentioned, they have the pieces across the board. Their offensive line has been really incredible. Of course, they built that offensive line after the damage was done to Andrew Luck, and he ended up retiring, which is so unfortunate. But they have lots of depth at wide receiver. As you mentioned, Michael Pittman really establishing himself as a number 1 wide receiver for them, with T.Y. Hilton somewhat on the decline. Jonathan Taylor has been incredible. Let's not forget Marlon Mack is coming back from injury, and also Nyheim Hines. They have it, as well as their scat back, all-purpose back there. And then the defense is just solid across the board. As you mentioned, all pros all over the place. They draft Kwity Paye, who is in a great position where he won't have too much asked of him right off the bat because of the talent around him to really go out there and just play football and do what he does best and get after the passer. So I do think, as good as this team looks, if Carson Wentz can't perform or they don't have a solid quarterback, then it's going to mean a long season and a lot of struggle for these Colts, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I do think that, if this team stays healthy, like you mentioned, they're going to need Carson Wentz to stay healthy because, Jacob Eason and Sam Ehlinger, as much as I love Sam Ehlinger, it's just, hook 'em alumni there. But I just don't think that you can rely on those guys to kind of carry the load. If Carson Wentz isn't healthy, like you mentioned, that's going to be the X factor for this team. If Wentz goes down, they might be, a 4 or 5 win team. But if Carson Wentz stays healthy, I don't see why this team can't be an 11 to 12 win team if things go right for them, because they have all the capabilities and all the talent and a great coaching staff to be able to achieve that and be at least a wild card team, if not win the division if things go right and the Titans kind of flounder a bit, which we don't expect them to do. But I just don't see how the Colts going into the season can't be a team that everybody's circling and thinking, that's a team that we should watch out for this year.
Yeah, absolutely. If they have the quarterback play, then they're going to be one of the top teams in the AFC, I think. But again, that's a huge if and a big question mark for them. We got to see what kind of Carson Wentz we get this year and if that Carson Wentz can stay healthy.
Yep. So moving on to the Jacksonville Jaguars, Miklos. They bring in Urban Meyer, the obviously longtime Ohio State head coach in NCAA college football and former analyst for Fox, coming over here to the NFL now. And we've seen with past, it works out sometimes it doesn't, going for making that jump from the from college to the pros there. And with this team that finished 1-15 last year, they won their first game of the season against the Colts and never won a game after that. Again, they bring in Trevor Lawrence with the first overall pick. What were projected to be a generational talent at quarterback, but we've seen through the years, even if they have the best talent at quarterback with the number 1 overall pick, if you don't have an environment for him to succeed and you really don't give him the proper development, with proper coaching and with great players around him, they're going to fold. We saw Andrew Luck, obviously. He had to go into an early retirement as a first overall pick. Way too well back in the day, Jamarcus Russell, everybody expected him to be a fantastic talent, and he didn't end up working out with the Oakland Raiders, and, there's a lot of other character issues with that. But just as far as example, just because you have a number 1 overall quarterback doesn't mean that you guys are going to instantly be better, although Trevor Lawrence is that guy that everybody projects probably the best quarterback prospect since Peyton Manning was drafted in the late 90s. So what are you expecting from the Jacksonville Jaguars? I know Travis Etienne, at the time of recording this, unfortunately is done for the season, so that hurts them as Trevor Lawrence's kind of safety net there at running back and his former teammate there at Clemson. So they're going to have to rely a lot on James Robinson and Carlos Hyde coming over from Seattle to be the backup there. So what are we expecting from the Jacksonville Jaguars this year as they try to rebuild here and take that next step with everything new going on? And it's an exciting feel for the Jaguars this year.
Yeah, I definitely think it's an exciting feel. They brought in a lot of pieces with Urban Meyer taking over. And I think the biggest question that they're going to need to answer this year is how they're going to handle losses. Urban Meyer and Trevor Lawrence have been blessed throughout their football careers to not have lost very many football games at all. Their records are ridiculous, but this is the NFL. And even your Tom Brady's he's the greatest quarterback of all time. He's taken his lumps and had, 4 or 5 lost seasons. And that's double what Trevor Lawrence has in his career. And guess what? This team does not have the talent that Tom Brady was working with over his years in New England and now in Tampa Bay. So whenever they take their lumps, it's really going to be a question of what kind of character this team has. Will they continue to compete in these games, or will they get behind and get punched in the mouth and then just fold? I think that is going to be the biggest question for both of them to answer. And also the biggest question is Urban Meyer going to be the Nick Saban of the NFL, or is he going to be the Pete Carroll? We've seen both situations happen with college coaches flaming out hard in their transition to the NFL, or having some success, as Pete Carroll is a good example. So it's going to be a real a lot of questions to be answered this season.
Yeah, we'll see if he's going to be the next Cliff Kingsbury and turn this offense into a juggernaut like he's kind of trying to do there in Arizona. But as far as the defensive side of the ball, Miklos, what are we expecting from the Jags? They've got some first-round talent on there. Again, it's not quite, Saxonville that it was a few years ago that almost led them to being in the Super Bowl. But they've got Josh Allen, not the quarterback Josh Allen, but the defensive lineman Josh Allen that they took as a first-round pick. They've got Miles Jack, who's probably the only guy remaining from that Saxonville era that was so good at linebacker. They draft Clavon Chazon as a first-round pick. They bring in Shaq Griffin from the Seattle Seahawks. They've got solid pieces on the defense, but again, do you think that they're going to be able to hold up against teams like Tennessee and Indianapolis here on the defensive side of the ball?
Well, I think the defense, just like the offense, both units have guys who are solid pros and have proven that they can perform in the NFL. I think it's a real question of how they can put it together as a unit. The defense definitely has more age and more experience across the board, and so they may have to carry the offense a bit if Trevor Lawrence is struggling, or Marvin Jones is a new piece, even though he's a good wide receiver. DJ Chark, we've got to see what kind of season he's going to put together this year with a new quarterback. So we really have to see how both units work together to try and bring some success to this team. And just like the offense is going to have to respond to taking their lumps, the defense is going to have to do the same thing. If they give up a huge drive or a big play for a touchdown, how are they going to respond to that? Are they going to come back and lock it down and give Trevor Lawrence a chance to maybe make a mistake or two to keep them in games?
I got two questions for you. One, does Trevor Lawrence start day one, or do they give the reins to Gardner Minshew to start and kind of work Trevor Lawrence in as this team progresses through the season? And two, what are we expecting from Trevor Lawrence when he does get in there? What would be a successful season? Again, like we can't really put win totals on what a successful season is. I mean, we've seen, like you mentioned a few weeks ago, bad 4-win teams and good 4-win teams. So do you think he starts from day one here? And two, what do you think would be a successful season for him and this team?
I don't understand or see a situation where he doesn't start week one. If you want to win football games, he's clearly the better quarterback than Gardner Minshew. I don't care how many good games Gardner Minshew had, and I know he's an established NFL quarterback. Trevor Lawrence is the guy, and I know they're being cute about not starting him week one, but we've seen what guys do when they start week one. Justin Herbert, we saw last year, clearly should have started week one. We know Tyrod Taylor and his relationship with the coaching staff that was in LA at the time for the Chargers. So we understand that situation. But as soon as given the opportunity, Herbert took over, and it wasn't even close, the difference in talent between the two of them. So I think for sure he should start week one, unless they're, trying to prove a point or something. And two, I think to consider a success, you're looking at a Justin Herbert-like season. I think that's a good benchmark for him, or even Joe Burrow before injuries. Both of them were in situations where they had maybe less than the ideal situation on their teams. Joe Burrow, worse situation than Herbert. Herbert obviously had some more talent around him, but both of those guys showed that you can come out of college and step right in and be extremely successful. So I think a similar season to Joe Burrow pre-injury, and even what Justin Herbert had, it should be the expectation regardless of wins for Trevor Lawrence.
Yep. So again, the Jaguars, I think they're trending in the right direction, but we'll see if Urban Meyer can be as great as everybody assumes him that he will be, coming from the college ranks and those great teams with Ohio State and Trevor Lawrence coming over from a great Clemson program. It's definitely going to be interesting, and I think Travis Etienne going down obviously was a big loss, so James Robinson's going to have to carry the load like he took the league on by storm last year as a undrafted college free agent that came in and had a great season for them at the running back position that they did not expect. So we'll see what kind of happens for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jaguars, but I assume that they will improve from their 1-15 season. And with this new regime and new just life within up and down the organization, kind of like the Detroit Lions, it was needed. And hopefully in a few years, they're a team that we're looking at that really did it right and built from the bottom up here, coming back up through the ranks. So let's move on here to the last team in the AFC South. Last but not least, the favorites to win the division, and one of the favorites in the AFC this year, Miklos, the Tennessee Titans. Again, their defense is up and down, and it definitely has to be better than it was last year. They don't have Dean Pease anymore, which obviously affected them last year, but Mike Vrabel is a defensive head coach, so he's obviously going to be going in there with a good scheme. And then you have Todd Downing now as the new offensive coordinator. They lose Arthur Smith to the Atlanta Falcons, their offensive coordinator, last year, so it's going to be a little bit of a transition. We'll see if Downing kind of takes what Arthur Smith did with this team and kind of really doesn't change a lot, because they were really solid all around. Obviously, they're going to be led by Derrick Henry, King Henry. I mean, what a freak of nature this guy is as a running back, and somebody that as an offensive coordinator, I'm sure is easy when you have a guy like that in your backfield that is just a guy. Two or three guys have to tackle this guy to knock him down. And then they bring in Julio Jones from Atlanta for a second-round pick, which they kind of took advantage of Atlanta's cap situation and Julio wanting to move on after a Hall of Fame career with the Atlanta Falcons. So the 1-2 punch of A.J. Brown and Julio Jones is going to be really exciting to watch. They bring in Josh Reynolds as kind of a slot wide receiver from the L.A. Rams, so that's going to be really solid as well. And then at tight end, they've got Anthony Firks, who really came on last year with Arthur Smith's offense as a tight end. So what are we expecting from Ryan Tannehill-led offense here for the Tennessee Titans? Do you think losing Arthur Smith is going to hurt this team as far as the offensive play calling, or do you think that they're going to pick up right where they left off, and adding a player like Julio Jones on and off the field is going to be invaluable for this team as they try to win the AFC South once again?
I will say, if I did not have the experience that I had with Todd Downing being the offensive coordinator with my then Oakland Raiders at the time, I would not be as concerned as I am for the Tennessee Titans. The year that we had Todd Downing as our offensive coordinator, we ran the simplest, most ridiculous offense I have ever seen. My touch football team has a more complex offense than the one we ran with the Raiders that year. It was extremely frustrating to watch week in and week out, and obviously our offense struggled that year. That being said, if the offense is just slam Derrick Henry down an opponent's throat every single play, then I think you're in an okay spot, because he's definitely that's your go-to card right there for if you're the Tennessee Titans. I think he's definitely the only player I can see having an opportunity to repeat as a 2,000-yard runner, which hasn't been done before in the NFL. But I really hope Todd Downing has learned in the years since he was the offensive coordinator for the Raiders, for the Titans' sake, because they really are returning all their majority of their offensive line. Ryan Tannehill has clearly had a renaissance in his career. Julio Jones has had his injury history, but guess what? A.J. Brown is the guy in Tennessee. And for Julio to come in and maybe they take the mileage off him and push Josh Reynolds a lot more and then use Julio a lot more judiciously, then this offense is in a prime position to dominate this year. I just hope their offensive coordinator doesn't hold them back.
And again, like you mentioned, maybe Julio, even if he's not 100%, we've seen the Falcons use him as a decoy before, and regardless of if he's injured or not, you have to put attention on Julio Jones. Again, for whatever reason, he was not targeted in the red zone during his career as much as you'd think from a number one wide receiver, but again, he's just a presence on and off the field that I think is going to be it's going to pay dividends for the Tennessee Titans as they continue to build a solid roster here and a great organization that they're building there. If Ryan Tannehill goes down, I mean, we'll have to see, but it seems like he's really elevated and, like you said, had a career renaissance since his years in Miami, and he got the big bucks now. Henry's got the big contract, so their offense really has to put up or shut up this year because they're investing a lot of money into these guys, and they're projected to do big things, so we'll see if they can live up to those expectations. As far as the defensive side of the ball, Miklos, what do you expecting from this Titans team that was not very good last year after losing Dean Pease as the defensive coordinator? They've got some first-round talent on this defense, but they've got to be a heck of a lot better if they want to be a team contending with the Bills or the Chiefs when it comes time to the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, and you know what? They really put it together at the end of the year last year. I think it was just the beginning of the year they were historically awful to start off the year and really put them in some bad situations. But they add some nice pieces. They bring over Bud Dupree from Pittsburgh, who they're hoping recovers from his injury and adds a solid pass rushing presence. with Jeffrey Simmons and Harold Landry. They also bring in Danico Autry from Indianapolis, who is a solid defensive presence as well and can rush the passer when needed. I think the additions of Caleb Farley and Elijah Molden in the draft, along with bringing in Janoris Jenkins, really brings some more depth to that secondary, who I think struggled the most last year. They're really hoping for Kevin Byard to have a bounce back year, and then Christian Fulton to take that step up and be the corner they expected him to be whenever they drafted him out of LSU.
They've lost some pieces over the years on the defensive side of the ball. They lose Adoree Jackson in the secondary. Do you think that these guys, the front seven for this team, is going to be the bread and butter, or do you think that the secondary is going to have to step it up and really be relied upon playing against a team like Indianapolis that's going to be airing the ball out as long as Carson Wentz stays healthy, and you'd expect Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence to be throwing the ball as well. So it's easy when you have the Houston Texans as the fourth team in your division. But with that said, I mean, even outside of their division, they're going to be going up against, a Ravens, a Bills, a Chiefs. Those are really, really good teams that you're going to have to get past if you're going to want to make it into the AFC Championship game. And for their sake, they have high expectations, maybe even be the Super Bowl representative for the AFC this year. So how much better do you think this defense has to be? And do you think that they have the capabilities to be that, to be able to get them to where they think that they can be this year with that offense?
Well, I think it's a combination of the front seven and the secondary. I think the front seven needs to step up, and they really need Bud Dupree and Danico Autry as the two new additions to bring their presence, to take the pressure off Jeffrey Simmons and Harold Landry and even Rashaan Evans back there. And then from the secondary, they need the new pieces, the Caleb Farley, Elijah Moulton, and Janoris Jenkins, who are coming in, all of them to step in right away and allow Kevin Byard to be the ball-hawking safety that he is back there. And then they need Christian Fulton to step up and be the player they expected him to be when they drafted him last year.
Yeah, so interesting stuff with the Tennessee Titans, Miklos. And with that said, I mean, we might as well pull it up here. The betting odds for the AFC South this year. The Titans are the favorite now at minus 109. The Colts are second at plus 142. The Jags at plus 716. And the Texans at plus could be 100,000 at this point, and I wouldn't be shocked. But it's at plus 2,888, which I think is hella generous for the Houston Texans at this point. But do you see the Tennessee Titans repeating, or do you think that the Colts really give them a run for their money if Carson Wentz stays healthy?
I do think the Colts give them a run for their money if Carson Wentz stays healthy, but that's a huge if. But I do think it's a two-horse race here in this division. Titans are definitely have the slight edge as the favorite because of the depth that they return and just how solid they are. Well, I feel like they're more solid across the board in the offensive end, where the Colts probably have the advantage on the defensive end. But if Carson Wentz can't perform, then the Colts are really going to struggle. So I do think it's the Titans' division to lose. Yeah,
and again, we mentioned from the other divisions in the AFC, I mean, it's tough because you have two or three good teams within every division here in the AFC for the most part. And do you think that just because of the competitiveness of the AFC the last couple of years here, do you think that, the second place team in this division could miss the playoffs?
Oh, 100%. I think based on the depth in the rest of the AFC East is going to be crazy competitive. We talked about it a couple weeks ago, just how good outside of the Jets, but who are on the upswing still, but outside of the Jets, three teams there who all could threaten to make the playoffs given how they perform. The AFC North, three teams there as well who could actually even four teams depending on how the Pittsburgh Steelers play, and even the Bengals. Who knows how Joe Burrow comes back. If he comes back and rips it, they have an outside opportunity of making a wild card spot. But definitely top three teams in the North, they're favorites in the AFC. The Ravens are incredible. If the Browns perform like I hope they perform, they're going to be ridiculous. And then the Steelers are always solid. And then the AFC West, Chiefs obviously are in there. Chargers have an opportunity to be really good. The Broncos have an opportunity to be really good. My Raiders, if they catch fire, have an opportunity to steal a playoff spot. So I really think that you need to win this division in the AFC South if you have a hope of making the playoffs.
And it's unfortunate because I think the Colts, they're there, but they're unfortunately running into a juggernaut-like offense this year with Tennessee. And we'll see for Tennessee. I mean, they're the hunted, like we mentioned. It's different when you're the team that everybody's chasing and you have all these high expectations. So we'll see if the Titans can kind of live up to that. But as a Titans team, could you see them winning, 13, 14 games this year?
I do think they have the weapons there, and to take the pressure off their defense, just grind Derrick Henry out there, which is exactly what he's built for. And that's how you can close out a lot of games and really control the game. And so given the physicality of their wide receivers as well, I mean, A.J. Brown and Julio Jones are both beasts of wide receivers. So have that with Derrick Henry just slamming down the main street of every defense. I think the Titans are definitely in a position to help their defense out and really grind out some tough wins if they need to.
Yep. So, I mean, I think it's a 2-horse race, but like you mentioned, it could turn into a 1-horse race really in this division if Carson Wentz isn't able to stay healthy, and the Titans really could just run away with it and be the team that the only team that makes the playoffs from this division, because we're not expecting really anything from the Jags this year as they continue to build back up. And I mean, the Houston Texans, we don't even have to mention them. They're probably going to, I'm going to project them right now as the number 1 overall pick going into next year's draft, and I'm sure I'm not alone in saying that. So the Titans really have a real chance here this year to really take this division over and, possibly have a good chance at having a home games throughout the playoffs because of the possibility of this division being really weak if the Colts aren't able to live up to their standards here. So I'm going with the Titans as well, along with you. We're both going with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the NFC South. And that's it for the division preview shows. So Miklos, any last words before we wrap it up and wrap up our 4th part of our 4-week series here of the division previews in the NFL?
Yeah, I am unbelievably excited for this NFL season. I don't think I've been this excited for lots of young players across the league, regardless of just how excited I am for how my Raiders are going to do this year. I do feel like it's an exceptionally good year for rookie quarterbacks and what they can bring to the table. Mac Jones has a huge opportunity in New England. Justin Fields with the Bears, which is not to mention, you got Trevor Lawrence out there, Trey Lance if he gets the opportunity in San Francisco, and Zach Wilson with the Jets. There's lots of young quarterbacks who have an opportunity to really hit the ground running and perform, and that is, not even mentioning Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow from last year. So I think it's going to be a really exciting season, and I cannot wait to get started.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be great in a few weeks here, and players will be all rested up after that new bye week that comes in the preseason. So we'll get fired up for the last week of the preseason. Hopefully no big injuries. We'll get ready for fantasy football drafts in the next couple of weeks. Those are going to be really fun as well. And stay tuned for more content on this network as far as the NFL goes going into the 2021 season. Fans are going to be back in most stadiums, so that's going to be fun to watch as well. So just a really exciting time for the NFL and for the football junkies like us. It's all about the shield, baby, as Miklos would say. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap it up for today's episode of Straight to the Extra Point right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network. As always, I'm one of your hosts. My name is Brandon Caputo. You can follow me on Twitter right underneath at Caputs13_AGM. As well, you can follow my co-host Miklos at Miklos_McMaster. And as well, you can follow the podcast on Twitter at Armchair GM Pod. A big thank you to all of our great sponsors. Help out us on Support the Network, keeping the show on the air. And to you viewers out there and football junkies for tuning in and listening along for this part and all 4 parts of our division preview shows here for the NFL. We really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to these episodes that we've done over the last 4 weeks. It's been a lot of fun giving you guys our opinions and thoughts on the season. So once again, this is the August 25th, 2021 edition of the Armchair GM Sports Network and of the Straight to the Extra Point podcast. Enjoy the NFL preseason week 3, and we'll see you guys back here in a couple of weeks. You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.